And going live on Facebook. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Afreilich and Purim, for those of you that find yourselves in a place where it's Purim already, for those of you that are like us in Montana, it is still the fast of Esther. We still got an hour and a half to the fast, but we're going strong. We don't want to miss a Torah class. Look at the view behind me. Come on, Habibi, look at that. We live in Montana. What are we going to let a little bit of fasting? If Esther can do it, we certainly can. Let me just share this on 2 social media platforms, and then we will roll. It's going to be a lot of Purim fun. And what I mean by fun, I mean fun for your intellect, for your emotions, and for your soul. Fun for your body will happen soon. Let me just share this. Where are we? Jewish.tv. We have a special guest with us. Oh, Erica, all the way from Norway. Happy Purim in Norway. We have a fan club all over the place that join our class every week. She joins every week from Norway.
What time is it over there? It's over.
Erica, write to us what time it is. Everyone wants to know what time it is in Norway. More options. Share via. There we go. Just going to share it to 2 pages and we'll be ready to roll.
Sorry, yawning already.
It's okay. You're yawning now, but
been working too hard.
Okay. We're going to wake you up in 5 seconds as soon as we
I
roll.
believe it.
It's 2 a.m. in Norway.
Wow.
And she joins our class. I hope she has the night shift at Walmart in Norway. Oh, Shlomo is joining. Beautiful. Very good. And here we go. Okay. We are on all platforms, so we are covered. And I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves. I get up early to pray every day, Erica. That's beautiful. And we are rolling. So I'd like to read to you the last chapter of the Megillah. So, there's 10 chapters to the scroll of Esther, and we always get caught up in the story, right? Mordechai, he reports the plot of Bixon and Sarah. She gets well connected in the palace. Esther's the queen. Haman gets a decree. We always tend to focus on the main parts of the story, which is not a bad idea. It is the holiday of Purim, and it commemorates and celebrates the incredible miracle. But there's, like in every story, there's the part that happens at the end that we sometimes don't pay attention to. And that's why I want to read for you chapter 10, the last chapter of the Megillah, the Scroll of Esther. It's very short, but it says a lot, and I'm going to share with you tonight. Everything I share with you tonight is not my own invention. I don't make my own inventions. This is all from an incredible deep talk that the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, shared in Purim 1973 and 1975, and it was compiled together in one of his edited talks in volume 16 of his edited talks. So this is what it says in the Scroll of Esther. King Achashverosh levied taxes on both the mainland and the islands. So like a good king, and a good government, he always had to add some taxes. And then it says, all his mighty and powerful acts and a full account of the greatness of Mordechai, whom the king had promoted, are recorded in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. So if you go back to the ancient scrolls, not the Jewish scrolls, the historical scrolls of the people of Media and Persia, right? There was Babylon, Media, Persia in those 70 years of the Babylonian exile. If you go look at their scrolls, you will find that it talks about how Mordechai was promoted because of his incredible deeds. And then it says, this is how the Megillah ends. For Mordechai the Jew was viceroy to King Achashverosh. He became the vice president. He became the vice king, the viceroy, like Joseph was in Egypt. Mordechai became to Achashverosh. He was a great man among the Jews and found favor with the multitude of his brethren. He sought the good of his people and was concerned for the welfare of all his posterity. So it talks about the end of the story. What did Mordechai end up after the whole story, where his cousin was the queen, and the Jews were finally saved, and these 75,000 troublemakers were killed. Not murdered, they were killed. And Haman and his 10 sons were hung. What happens after all of that? Mordechai is recorded in the historical documents of Media and Persia. He is a viceroy to King Achashverosh. He's great amongst the Jews. And he's liked by most of his brethren. Not all, but most. That's how we end the Megillah, on a high note. The Ratzu Leroy Vechav. Then it says Doirish Tevel Amoy. He's always looking out for the good of the people. But obviously, that statement that he was liked by most of his people, right? My Bubby always told me nobody in leadership is liked by everyone. But is that really what it's saying here about Mordechai? That simply they did, even though they won and the annihilation decree was eliminated, was annulled. So the Talmud in the Tractate of Megillah, which talks about the story of Purim, says, L'roiv echav v'loy lekol echav, not to all of his brethren, melamed shepirshu mimenu mixas Sanhedrin. It's clear, says the Talmud, that some members of the Sanhedrin, of the great body of halachic authority, which Mordechai was a member of, they pirshu mimenu, they remove themselves from Mordechai. That's the words of the Talmud. So the great Mordechai that we always get dressed on Purim, you get dressed at least once in your life, you have to get dressed like Mordechai. Sometimes some people get dressed like Haman. It's maybe a reflection of their character, who they choose to get dressed up like. But the Talmud says that some of the Sanhedrin remove themselves from him. Then the Talmud continues that Gadol Talmud Torah Yosem Atzal B'Fasha, studying Torah and being a Torah scholar is more important than saving people, saving souls. Because earlier Mordechai was number 5 on the list of the ranking members of the Sanhedrin. He was number 5, and after the story of Purim, he became number 6. So he lost one ranking in the ranking of the members of the Sanhedrin because Mordechai became a minister in a secular government, and therefore it says, Yarad nechashivusi etzel chachamim, the sages minimized their reverence for him because he chose, as a member of the Sanhedrin, he chose to become a minister, right? He could have told Achashverosh, sorry, I don't want to be your viceroy. I got better things. I'm a member of the Sanhedrin. But he agreed to do it. And so it seems like the fact that he was not devoted to Torah as he should have been, or as he used to be, minimized his status amongst his friends. But the question is a very big one because, first of all, if he wasn't into Torah study, why was he a member of the Sanhedrin in the first place? The Sanhedrin were the ultimate body of lovers of knowledge and Torah and depth and wisdom, and that's where they would intercalate. They would intercalate the months, whether it's going to be a leap year, whether it's going to be a leap month. That was done with the Sanhedrin. These were top-notch scholars that spoke multiple languages. They were top of the line. If he wasn't meant for that business, if he was much better being a Jewish activist who gets involved in politics and does good work, he should have stuck to that. Why was he ever in the Sanhedrin in the first place? Secondly, how did the conversation work? When you find out that part of the Sanhedrin doesn't like you, doesn't support you, or are removing themselves from you, wouldn't you think it makes more sense to either lay out your case and tell the members of the Sanhedrin why they're wrong and they should stick with you, or say, you know what, I made a mistake, I should not be part of this government, I'm going to go back to being a member of the Sanhedrin. Because what did the conversation look like? And besides, if the majority of the members of the Sanhedrin did support him, then that's what should matter most. And therefore, he shouldn't lose his status in the scholarly body of the Sanhedrin. He could say, listen, what do you mean? Because a couple of guys don't like what I'm up to, therefore what? Most of the members of the Sanhedrin, which were the scholarly body, they agreed with my lifestyle, and therefore, they agreed with my choices, and therefore, there's no reason why I should be minimized in any way from number 5 to number 6, or whether I should be treated or even represented in a lower status just because a couple of guys don't agree with my philosophy. So we have to start with something very basic. The battery's low. No, what was that? It said the battery was low, but it's fully charged. Hold on. 95%. I think we're good. So we have to start with something very, very clear in the language. Everything in Judaism, language is very, very important. So when it says in the Talmud, Pirshu mimenu Sanhedrin, they remove themselves from him. It doesn't say Cholku Allah. It doesn't say they argued with him. It doesn't say Ein Ruach Chachamim Noiche Imenu, that the members of the body of the authority are not happy with him. All it says is Pirshu Mimenu, that they separated. They decided to take a break from him, which means they weren't arguing with him. It wasn't a fight. There was no fight amongst the Sanhedrin about whether Mordechai should be part of the Sanhedrin or not, but yet it was enough for some of them to remove themselves from him. So how do you reconcile that? It wasn't bad enough that they would be in a fight with him or they would argue with him, which is why he never changed his ways. But at the same time, they didn't want to hang out with him very much. So I want to start, the Rebbe in this talk brings a story of the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover of Yosef Rosen was the incredible chief rabbi of the city of Dvinsk in Latvia, in the same city where the Rogatchover was the rabbi. I mentioned the Rogatchover before. The Rogatchover was in the same city as the Or Sameach. The Or Sameach was an incredible Lithuanian Torah sage and scholar who authored many incredible commentators, including a commentary on the Rambam called Or Sameach, including the Meshech Chochmah. And then you had the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover was the Hasidic rabbi of the city. He had very long hair. He was considered a Nazirite, a Nazir. So the following story the Rebbe shared about the Rogatchover, that after the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the Rebbe's father-in-law, left Russia and came to he once traveled from Russia to a rabbinic conference in Riga, Latvia. And one of the people at this meeting was the Rogatchover. Many rabbis were there, leaders, activists, and they were there to get together to brainstorm how to support Russian Jewry. Fascinating enough, right? Because the whole world is busy now focused on Russia and the former Soviet Union. This was still very much in the Soviet Union. And they were discussing during communism, during the Bolsheviks, they were discussing how to retain and strengthen Jewish life in Russia. And at this meeting, there was a request of the Rogatchover, this great scholarly, incredible, brilliant Torah scholar, that he should join a committee of rabbis that will be involved in figuring out how to move forward as a movement in fighting the Bolsheviks and the communists. Mostly the Bolsheviks, the Sektsy, and all the other various breakaways of that group. So they said to the Rogatchover, the Rogatchover had a mind that was unparalleled. And the Rogatchover, they asked him to join a committee, right? And like every Jewish congregation, they have to have committees, invite them more committees and boards and committees. So he answered their request with the following statement. He said, the Gemara says, the Talmud says in the Tractate of Brachos, in the Babylonian Talmud, that the Chassidim Arishonim, the original pious people, we just spoke about it recently at our JLI class, that from this same Talmud, that the original pious people used to spend 9 hours a day in prayer. 9 hours a day in prayer. They would have an hour before prayer to prepare, an hour after to meditate and bring it to life, and same thing 3 times a day. Times 3, you got 9 hours a day in prayer, which isn't so bad. It's 24 hours a day, so you got 15 hours a day where you could do other things besides pray. But the Talmud asked the $1 million question, how is their Torah that they study ever going to be preserved? And how is their work ever going to be accomplished? In other words, when do they have time to get a job if they're praying 9 hours a day? And how do they have time? When do they have time to spend enough to give themselves some quality time for their Torah study to be? Oh, someone's coming in. Yeah. Thank you, Chaya. Soon you'll be able to be the tech support, then I won't have this issue. We're training you without you even knowing. So the Talmud says, how they never get a chance. They're davening 9 hours a day. They're praying 9 hours a day. So when do they have time to work? And when do they have time to preserve their Torah study? It's a valid question. If you found out someone was doing something 9 hours a day, you would want to know how they have time for other things. So the Talmud answers in the Babylonian Talmud, because they are pious, the Torah that they study is preserved. They have a special thing where the Torah is preserved, and anything they put their hands on turns to gold. Because they spend 9 hours a day praying, so the study of Torah, whenever they get a chance to study Torah, it's preserved. They don't lose the knowledge that they've studied, so it stays with them, and their work that they do turns to gold. They're blessed in their work. That's in the Babylonian Talmud. In the Jerusalem Talmud, there's the same concept, but a little different language. And everything is exact in Judaism. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it says, because they're pious, right? I'm sorry, it says, That's in the Babylonian. In Jerusalem, Talmud says, bracha nitenes b'teirasam. There's a great blessing imbued into their Torah study. Ubracha nitenes b'malachim. There's a great blessing in their work. So what's the difference? It sounds like a technical difference, but in Judaism, no such thing. It's a nuanced difference that makes all the difference. The difference between the Babylonian Talmud, where it says that their Torah study is preserved, versus the Jerusalem Talmud, where it says bracha nitanes b'teirasam, there's a blessing imbued into their Torah study, is a difference between whether they're just preserving whatever they were able to study, or are they actually able to get the deeper levels of Torah understanding and depth. Because they pray so much, when they study, they can not only retain what they study, but their Torah study itself is qualitatively more impressive than anyone else. So is it just about a good memory that you won't forget what you're studying? Or is it actually the quality of Torah study when they get to study takes it to a whole deeper and more profound level of Torah understanding than anyone else because of their 9 hours that they spend in Torah? The Babylonian Talmud says their Torah study is preserved. They won't forget what they learn, which is why they spend 9 hours praying. Because they can learn for a little bit amount of time quantitatively, and they won't forget it. The Jerusalem Talmud says, no, it's more than that. It's not just the quantity, because if it's just the quantity, you're still going to wonder, they're not going to have enough time to keep up with so much depth and layers. But no, that's why it's qualitative as well, that when they study, the quality is so much deeper. Right? It really fits well with the style. The Babylonian Talmud is called Machshakim Yeshivani, which means it's like studying the Babylonian Talmud. If you haven't done it yet and you do it, you'll find out the hard way. And studying the Babylonian Talmud is like going into a deep tunnel, and you're not sure how you're ever going to get out of here. And many times it feels very dark, and there's questions and contradictions and questions, and trying to reconcile, doesn't reconcile. Then finally you think you're going to get that reconciliation, and they drop you a bomb. They say, Teku, that when Elijah comes, we'll get the reconciliation, right? I just spent 3 days studying, trying to get an answer, and the conclusion was that the questions were incredible, but the answer will come when Mashiach comes and Elijah comes and gives us an answer. It's complicated. It's a maze. It's twisted to get to the end of the plot. It's like a non-fictional book, because it's non-fiction, but it feels like a fiction. It's drama and drama and drama, and you may not come to the end and find what you're looking for. But that's the beauty of it. So the whole style of learning is like, listen, it's not about getting the results quickly. So we're not going to give you some bonus and qualitative understanding of it. That's why the Babylonian Talmud says, listen, be happy. If you study a lot, if you pray a lot, then when you study, you won't forget what you learn. But the Jerusalem Talmud is all about boom, boom, boom. It's two opinions. This is the halacha. This is how we do it. There's no 17 pages of arguments. That's why if you look at a set of Babylonian Talmud, 10 volumes, of Jerusalem Talmud, it's 10 volumes, and you try to get a set of Babylonian Talmud, it's 70 volumes for the same conclusions. So the Jerusalem Talmud is more straightforward, which is why also the philosophy, it's so much deeper and it's so much more qualitative. You get a lot in a very little quantity. That's why they're of the opinion that even though you're praying 9 hours a day, when you study, you will have the opportunity to go very, very deep because of that gift that you got, that bracha nitenes b'teirasam, that is a blessing in their Torah study. Taking all that, let's go back to Mordechai. Mordechai was a member of the Sanhedrin. Where was the Sanhedrin mostly located? In their prime, they were located in the Yun chamber, the chamber of Yun, the Lishkas HaGazis, in the temple in Jerusalem. And even the smaller Sanhedrin, the members of the 23, the main Sanhedrin, the supreme Sanhedrin had 71 members. The rest of them had 23, and they were in other parts of Israel. But the bottom line is the central command for the Sanhedrin with their prime location was in the Lishkas HaGazis in the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And yet, a lot of these members of the Anshe Knesset, the men of the Great Assembly, Nehemiah and Ezra and Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah and Malachi, all these guys, they were exiled by Babylon, by Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian exile. And now the remnants of them are still living in Babylon. They're living in exile, including Mordechai, including Daniel. Okay, some say Daniel was murdered during the story of Purim. He was Hassach. He was the one that reported to Mordechai that Bigsan and Seresh were plotting to kill the king. But Ezra and Mordechai for sure were there. Mordechai's there. He's a member of the Sanhedrin, but where is he? He's in exile. But his way of thinking generally as a whole is to think like a Jerusalemite, which means if I'm involved in Jewish activities, if I'm doing things outside of Torah study, I'm going to be uniquely blessed that the quality of my Torah study is going to be super successful. Because it says in the Jerusalem Talmud that bracha nitenes b'teirasim, that there's a bracha for those that do more than just studying. Even if you're a member of the Sanhedrin, you're going to be specifically blessed because of the good deeds you do. So yes, the Talmud's talking about prayer, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to make the 2 and 2 connection. Lives were on the line. Mordechai had the ability to be a savior to the Jewish people, to save Jewish lives. And therefore, even though he was a member of the Sanhedrin, he wasn't worried about losing his Torah knowledge and his Torah depth and his Torah wisdom, because he knew from his way of studying that the quality of the studying experience that he will have when he actually has time to study will fill in for any loss that, God forbid, may come about because he might be involved in public activity. And most of the members of the Sanhedrin agreed with him. You know, didn't agree with him? The ones that were not from Jerusalem. The members of the Sanhedrin who were more native Babylonians, and they thought the way the Babylonian Talmud thinks. And therefore, when they saw a guy like Mordechai, they're like, oh, no, he's becoming a political activist. He's going to save Jewish people's lives. What do you mean, a guy like that with such Torah study? What is he doing in a place like Idaho? What is he doing in a place like North Dakota? The guy like that with such Torah scholarship should be in a yeshiva somewhere teaching Torah. But he says, but I can't. I can't because Jews need me to be there for them. Not just Esther, but the entire empire needs me. And if I become viceroy of this country, boy, oh boy, do you know where I'm going to go with that? But that little group of members of the Sanhedrin, they weren't arguing with him. They understood he was coming from a Jerusalem Talmud perspective. It just says Parshim, and they said, listen, we can't be on board with this. We don't see the world the same way. And by the way, it's a great lesson. It's a great lesson in knowing that just because you disagree with someone, their style of operation doesn't mean you have to argue with them. They said to Mordechai, listen, we're not enemies. We get along. Just, we're not going to spend our time with someone who sees the world from such a Jerusalem perspective instead of a Babylonian perspective. It's both valid paths to Judaism. It's both valid paths to having a super duper relationship with God. And for being a member of Sanhedrin, you can do both. But you have to understand where Mordechai was coming from. He wasn't worried one iota that the fact that he's devoting himself now to save Jewish souls, to becoming a viceroy of a country that just a few months ago was a place where Jewish people were being threatened with total annihilation and decree, and he has now the opportunity to be the viceroy, second in command to Achashverosh. If the price he had to pay that he was Ratzi Leroy Vechav, that only a majority of the Sanhedrin agreed with him or liked him, but not all of them, it was a price he was willing to pay because he understood what was at stake, and he understood as well that it wouldn't affect him spiritually in any way. And it really fits in Mordechai's mind. This fits directly with the Sanhedrin's role. You know, there's something fascinating. The only time that the supreme body of law in Judaism, the Sanhedrin, the only time they're allowed to make rulings about life and death, about dinei nefashos, any ruling associated with the death penalty, for example, they can only do that if they're all sitting in unison, all 71 of them, in the Lishkas Hagazis in the Temple Mount. Right? So their greatest power was when they're in the Temple Mount. Yet, we are told in Tanit Ve'Eliyahu in the Medrash, it says, that the members of the great Sanhedrin would, I guess it was this is how my friend portrayed it. It was like the form of doing marathon running back then. I'm not sure exactly what they did, but they tied around themselves some kind of metal, steel, chains, almost chains around their legs and around their belly, and they would lift up their robes because most people wore robes back then. And this was it was like almost like a, what do you call those things that people in the grocery, if you schlep a lot of boxes, they wear a thing around their back to give their back strength. Back like this back support belts, yeah. So they did something with metal of that sort, so their back shouldn't go out on them, and they would go all over the land of Israel. They would leave Yerushalayim, they would leave the Temple Mount. The members of the Sanhedrin, the big halachic authorities who get to choose life, who get to decide life and death matters. Imagine the Supreme Court justices. Oh, once a month we're going to schlep from Washington D.C. and we're going to go to Wyoming to discuss matters of legal things to guide the people. first of all, probably be a good idea for the country's love of them. But that's what the Sanhedrin would do. It said they would go and they would run around all of the cities of Israel to teach Torah. So even though their primary place was in the Temple Mount, their ultimate goal was to guide the people, to teach the people. So you say, well, if that's the case, right? True. If you're going to schlep around, your status might go down a little bit. Mordechai's status dropped a little because he wasn't able to do things the way it was normally done. He wasn't able to be everywhere at the same time. And therefore, there are sometimes personal prices we pay, and that's okay. That's the key. Sure, Mordechai lost. He went from status 5 to 6. He went down a notch. But was it worth it to save the Jewish people? What's the question? Who would even argue that? Mordechai didn't worry about that because that's what Mordechai was. And so the Rogatchover was saying the same thing. He can't join no committee. He couldn't join the committee, not because he didn't want to. The Rogatchover was like the Babylonian Talmudic sages. He had that kind of mind. He knew that if he was going to get involved in a committee, it was going to affect his quality of his learning. Mordechai didn't have that problem. And in Lubavitch, in Chabad, the Rebbes didn't struggle with that either. The previous Rebbe used to steal, that's the quote, he used to steal from the time that he could have been learning Torah, deeper layers of Torah, and he gave himself totally over to the reality of saving souls, and not just spiritually. Mostly, the previous Rebbe in war-torn Soviet Union and then during the Holocaust, most of his work was to save people's physical lives, similar to what we see today with Chabad rabbis and Rebbetzins in Ukraine. We're seeing something unprecedented. How often do Chabad rabbis and Rebbetzins spend their time saving lives, not saving souls? Yes, every Chabad rabbi and Rebbetzin has had many moments in their experience where they actually have to intervene. This week, a rabbi here in Montana called me and said he's outside someone's house who had threatened to take his own life, and the car's in the garage. He doesn't know what to do. I said, what do you mean you don't know what to do? Call 911 and call them quickly and go bust into the house. Turns out the guy was already in the hospital, Baruch Hashem, and his life. But occasionally a Chabad rabbi and Rebbe does that. But to organize 30,000 people to come out on buses so you save their life from bombings and shellings in Ukraine, but that's what it's all about. That's what Mordechai understood. And it's interesting that the previous Rebbe made it clear that even though when you're trying to save souls, right, when you're trying to teach Judaism, you're not always teaching. Something I personally struggle with. Javi and I talk about this all the time. I love teaching. I love sitting and doing classes. I love learning new things in Torah. I love guiding people to be better human beings because A, it helps them, B, it helps me to be a better human being. You know what I don't like? I don't like talking to plumbers. I don't like being involved in maintenance. I don't like that. I don't like calling and figuring out how you get a locksmith. I don't like dealing with the water pressures down in the Chabad house or in the house. I don't like when the mikveh, so the heater in the mikveh goes out. I don't like dealing with I don't like that stuff. But the previous, and in this sichel, in this talk, the Rebbe says specifically that part of spreading Judaism means that sometimes you're going to have to deal with registration forms and making sure there's a proper place for the students to study and to raise money to cover the bills. And that's part of the operation that is worthy of us giving up. Sometimes on our Torah study, because it won't actually take away any of the depth of study that we will get to appreciate because of the qualitative experience like Mordechai did. So is there a place for some people to say, you know, Rabbi, giving my life to running a Chabad house or to being a Mordechai is not my thing? Absolutely. There is a segment within Judaism that is absolutely makes sense. And there are Jews that belong in a Jewish ghetto, and I don't mean that as a negative, but like, you know, Lakewood, Monsey, Crown Heights, that they belong there because this setup is not made for them. They're meant to spend their entire day, 9 hours a day davening and then studying. They can't break away because they have the Babylonian mindset that it will only preserve what they study. It will not add any blessing qualitatively into the experience. But if you want to be a student of the Rebbe and do it right, do it Mordechai style, then you pause, you say, yes, could be that I'm very, very talented, I'm very brilliant, I'm very wise, and I know how to learn Torah, and there's nothing that would enlighten me more than to sit and do this all day. But is that going to transform the Jewish world? Is that going to save souls? Is that going to save bodies? It's not just about souls, it's going to save bodies. And so that's why when I said, I think it was last class, Yeah, I think it was last week where I said that the Mishnah says that if you read the Megillah, if you read the scroll of Esther out of order or backwards, you don't fulfill the commandment. And the Baal Shem Tov said that what that means is that if you read the Megillah as if it's backwards, meaning it's some story that happened, 2,400 years ago, 2,500 years ago, but it's not a story that's relevant to my life today, then you haven't really fulfilled the experience of Purim. And so we're reading all this about Mordechai and his relationship with the Sanhedrin and the back and forth, the Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem Talmud and different mentalities, and the fact that he became the viceroy of Egypt, even though he was only liked by most of his brethren and not all of them. It's because it's okay. It's okay because sometimes the last words of the Megillah were, you change the page. What kind of tech support are you? The Megillah ends with these words, right? The last words. After it says he was only liked by some of his brethren, it says he sought the good of his people and was concerned for the welfare of all his posterity. Think about that. All of Mordechai's greatness, what was the last words of what he was ever remembered for, right? Mordechai is not mentioned anywhere else. There's some reference to him in the book of Chronicles, in the Divrei Hayamim, book of Ezra maybe, but his story, his life stories, the story of Mordechai that we know from the scroll of Esther, and how did it end? He was Dairish Toiv Le'ama. He was a person that sought the good of his people. Doesn't say spiritually, physically. He was a viceroy. So sure, he did the spiritual part, but it was also physical. And Daiver Shalim L'Chozarei, and was concerned for the welfare of all his posterity, all of his descendants, all of his people. And he understood that to do that sometimes means you're going to give up on some spiritual greatness that you may be looking for, like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the Terasa Yom Nasi, he learned Torah all day, and there's room for that. But if we're looking at the bigger picture of Judaism, and what Mordechai teaches us more than anything else is that your greatness will come, and I mean your greatness in Torah will come. Don't worry about that. God will take care of your knowledge in Torah if you're interested. You have to be interested. You have to actually spend some time studying. But if you're worried that you don't have enough time to study, if you're worried that you don't have enough time to delve deeper, but you devoted your life to save bodies and souls of your people, not everyone has to, actually, they don't disagree. Not everyone has to hang out with you. Not everyone has to spend time with you. Some of them remove themselves. It's a different style. It's familiar. It's not for me. But that's where it's at. That's the whole story of the Megillah. It's about Mordechai. It all started when Mordechai told Esther, if you'll be silent right now. What did he tell Esther? Esther said, I don't know, I'm going to go to the king. I wasn't called. She wasn't a leader yet. She was just an orphaned girl who was schlepped into a palace, and now they want her to do something. And she doesn't want to do it. And Mordechai tells us those incredible words, which everyone knows in Bozeman, that anyone that's ever heard me read the Megillah knows that that's the words. If you be silent, salvation and greatness will come to the Jewish people. A betterment will come to the Jewish people from somewhere else. So you will. The Jews are not going to be annihilated, Mordechai said. The salvation will come. And you and your father's house, meaning you and your family history, will be lost forever. You have an opportunity. And then he said those incredible words, and who knows if perhaps the entire fact that the fact that you are the queen, that you reached royalty is for this moment. And if you don't step up, it's okay. Jewish people will be okay. And that really is the message. Mordechai understood that to be a Jew means to give up on your comfortability, whether it was Esther in her reality or the rest of the Jews in their reality, the members of the Sanhedrin. You got to give up something to be a leader of the Jews. And at the end, you won't actually be giving up anything. You'll actually be benefiting so much more from it. So in the short term, it might feel like you're giving up. And that's part of it. Long term, you have nothing to worry about. The Eibusher takes care. The Rebbe once said that regarding the Shluchim's children, right? The hardest part of being a Chabad rabbi in Rebbetzin, the hardest part of following in Mordechai's footsteps is that you schlep your kids to live in places like Bozeman, Montana. So is Bozeman, Montana a bad place? Absolutely not. Is it a hard place for a religious, Orthodox, Chabad, Hasidic girl or boy? Absolutely. And the Rebbe once said, the Rebbe took that on his shoulders as a responsibility, that don't worry about it. That's a big statement. I don't think it's a statement we can take advantage of. I don't think it's a statement we can take for granted. We got to work hard on raising our children in the Hasidic dynasty, in the Hasidic philosophy. But the idea that you have to give up, you have to be able to give up something for Yiddishkeit, for the bigger cause. It's great to write out a check for Ukraine. It's great that every day you spend time, instead of focusing on Haman, you focus on Putin. I'm glad that Jews are involved with all the important things. And now everyone went, like I said, from being epidemiologists to being geopolitical experts. In 2 weeks, everyone went from being an expert on contagious diseases to being an expert on all of Eastern Europe, even though they can't pronounce one name of those cities correctly. Right? That makes my blood pressure from the whole thing. Kharkiv, it's Kharkov. What Kharkiv? And Kiev, it's not Kiev, it's Kiev. And Kherson, what's Kherson? It sounds like a croissant. It's Kherson. But we became experts. We're busy. What about you? What about me? Are we going to be Mordechais? Oh, my colleagues in Ukraine are doing amazing work. It's true. They're incredible human beings. I couldn't live in Ukraine and do what they do even without a war. I never wanted it. I was offered more than once to move to Eastern Europe. I was offered as a yeshiva student to move to Almaty, Kazakhstan, whatever it's called, Kazakhstan. Didn't want it. They offered me everything I wanted to move to Kazakhstan. I didn't want it. It's not America, baby. I don't want to live there. So the sacrifice of these people is incredible. But what about our sacrifice? When are we ready to internalize Mordechai and make him real in our life by doing what each of us needs to do to save another Yid, to save another Jew, to save another human being from physical annihilation, from materialistic annihilation, from hunger and homelessness, but obviously from spiritual annihilation? Don't, right? What's that sign? Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Jews don't let Jews skip Judaism. I'm going to make a new bumper sticker. Friends don't let Jews don't let Jews ignore Judaism. We don't. It's not your business. We're libertarians. No, we're not. Not when it comes to Yiddishkeit. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it strongly. And Mordechai is going to be the theme until we reach the ultimate Vena Hapoichu. As it says in the Megillah, it was a total transformation. We flipped it on its head. It was topsy-turvy. Haman was on. Mordechai is a viceroy. And the Jews are annihilated. That's the end of the story. That's always going to be the end of the story. And with that, I will wish those of you here in Montana, I will wish you the rest of the rest of the fast should be easy. Practically, it's about another hour until we can break our fast because we wait till the Megillah reading. For those of you that already broke your fast, I hope you have a wonderful, super stupendous Purim. It should be, as we read in the Megillah, and we say it every Saturday night in Havdalah, La Yehudim Hoysa, Oira v'simcha v'sasa v'ikar. For the Jews, there was light, and there was joy, and there was gladness, and there was honor. The Bias Mashiach Tzidkenu meriting to be reunited with all the Mordechais, Mordechai and Moshe and the Rebbe and all the heroes and heroines of Judaism that gave up so much to be the leaders that we appreciate and cherish. But we'll be reunited with them with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. May it be speedily in our days. Amen. Afreilach in Purim. And if you're in Bozeman or anywhere within driving distance of Bozeman, that includes LA. If you leave now, you could be in Bozeman by the party at 5 o'clock tomorrow. If you drive straight. L'chaim, l'chaim. And we'll see you back here, God willing, next week. If the sun, what do they say? If the sun is shining or the sun don't shine, what do they say? Whichever one. That's the one. Sei gesund. L'chaim Mitchell, L'chaim Chagai Margot, L'chaim they left already.
Mitchell's on the Zoom?
He was on the Zoom.
So I am proof that the parts of the brain don't always work together.
How?
I am so sorry. I knew that it was the fast event.
Was that why you made that face?
Yeah.
I honestly thought. No, Chaya actually said to me, "Is it okay that I said, of course it's okay. Not everyone fasts."
I'm really sorry.
Not even in the slightest.
But all of you, yes.
What do you mean? Chagai and Margot ate Hamantash all day today. They were planning for Purim for all of us.
Yeah, we bought them at Cantor's.
That's right. Well, it should be a wonderful. I thought you actually got like I saw what happened. I saw your face, and I thought
I
that you got what's it
realized-
called? I thought you got. You told me you have what's it called? Acid reflux, and I thought that's what happened. I was like, oh yeah, she's not feeling well. I'm glad it was just that. Sei gesund, Shlomo. Shlomo, we'll see you tomorrow. Margot and Chagai, come tomorrow. If not, we'll see you soon.
Where's
And I invited Daniela, by the way.
Daniela?
Are they even in town?
Yeah, they are in town.
I texted her twice. Tell her that the rabbi's waiting for the text back. It didn't come yet.
But they moved to Manhattan.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Manhattan, right?
They moved. So, but
Moved how far? They still go to Headwater. They can't be that far.
no. And it's spring break. I don't know if they're
I know. Listen, I know it's spring break, and that's why a big chunk of Bozeman's not here. But I did text her, and I'm just notifying the second generation that I did my job. Now, whether she responds,
thank you.
they say a cup can nicht aufstellen. I can't force it. I can only do my job.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. And we are only the parents,
I was gonna say, we all learned that the hard way, huh?